Let us get started. Finishing up on sexual behavior, just when we're totally sick of sexual behavior, the very end of it, where we left off, is looking at the evolution of it, looking at some of the challenges, the differential cost of reproduction for females and males, and differences in promiscuity that have evolved as a result of all sorts of species, male male competition, male displacement aggression, onto females, female female competition, alternative strategies, and their evolution when it comes to sexual behavior, maximizing. What else did we look at? Evolution of monogamy, evolution of sexual orientation, and long last, we got to what do people look for in a mate. And we started off with that cautionary note of make sure you are not confusing moral goodness with beauty, and keep that in mind if you're serving on a jury, because the attractiveness of the defendant will influence your decision making, or when you're hiring somebody, or all of that. The brain, or metaphorical brain, processing both moral worth and beauty in the same regions, external, internal beauty supposedly matching each other. So that is something to be on the lookout for. We then move to the single best predictor across the animal kingdom of who counts as attractive: someone with a symmetrical face. I've erased that poor guy's asymmetrical face. Symmetry in general as a marker of health, and symmetry being detectable in all sorts of species in remarkably subtle ways, and explaining that odd phenomenon that when you average out faces, when you produce composite faces, they are on the average more attractive than the individual faces that went into them, because they are emphasizing symmetry. They are getting rid of asymmetries that way. What else is looked for in a mate across humans in the animal world? All of that. Markers of health. Markers of health, which is related to looking for markers of symmetry, because that can be informative about that. Markers of health. And this gave rise to the work a zoologist named Zahavi's handicap principle, that, in a sense, a way to advertise your health to potential mates out there in the animal kingdom is to spend energy on stupid stuff like antlers, or incredibly flamboyant coloration, or stupid manes and heavy this or that, and with the signal, with the information, with the statement clearly being, if I can afford to spend all of my calories on these stupid antlers, I must be in very good health. That as display. And you even find in some species, vultures, for example, vultures, when they are trying to be sexually attractive and flashy and all of that, they've got some pigmentation thing that they put in their face, and it's got some molecular basis to it. I'm forgetting what, but the exact same molecule that gives off this carotenoid pigmentation in the face is central to immune function in vultures. In other words, if you can afford to like rouge up your face with these carotenoid things and you're a vulture, that must mean you have so much carotenoids. Your immune system is in such great shape that you must be irresistibly healthy. Much like the spillover effect, with if you're a neuron and you have so much ATP that you're spilling it out and sending it to the previous neuron, what you were saying is, I am in great shape. If your vulturish immune system is spilling out so many of these cofactors for immune function that you can like stick them in your lovely rosy vulture cheeks, once again, signaling, if I can afford to do this, I must be very healthy. Now, of course, what comes in with, as soon as you have handicap principle, how much you are going to handicap yourself by spending on stupid, extravagant, ostentatious secondary sexual things. As soon as that comes in, of course, There's the possibility of cheating, which is to disproportionately put your limited resources into secondary sexual display to fake someone out into thinking, look at all of their excess calories. Whereas you're spending all but your last one on display. This is seen in various ungulate species in aging males, that they start to disproportionately invest in their secondary sexual characteristics, hastening them to their demise, but hopefully convincingly suggesting to the world that they're actually a young buck teeming with excess calories and thus antler laden. And of course, as we know, as soon as cheating about your signals of health come in, detection selection for detecting individuals cheating. And, you know, we can tell the difference usually between somebody who is muscular, who's wearing a superhero muscle suit underneath their shirt or things of that sort, or you could tell that Ron DeSantis was wearing lifts on his shoes and thus attempting to appear taller and more presidential. Yeah. So as soon as there is the possibility of false display, false advertising, there better also be the evolution of detection of it. Now, when it comes to attraction being built around signals of health, the thing above all else at the very top of the list is signals of fertility. And this is immensely widespread, and you will see female baboons. We already know their estrogen levels. The higher the levels, the bigger the estrus swelling, and the more pheromones they are pumping out, that as advertisement. Female baboons who are aging, their estrous swellings are not as big anymore. Peri-adolescent female baboons, when they're first starting to get their cycles, and are almost certainly not fertile, not ovulating yet, not for about the first 6 cycles or so. They have very small estrus swellings. Okay, so advertising your markers not just of health, but of fertility. And we already know all sorts of ways in which this shows up. We know that women, for example, heterosexual women have a preference for male facial features with jutting jaw, jaws and chins and spandrels like that, jutting jaws and high foreheads and lots of musculature and all of that, which are testosterone dependent traits. And insofar as you were trying to decide who to settle down with for life and eventually hold hands with when you're looking at the grandkids graduating from preschool, you're looking for someone whose jaw outline tells you that they got a lot of the steroid hormone. Okay, we saw that female patterns of attraction for male faces fluctuate over the cycle. During the follicular stage, when estrogen levels are rising, that is the facial phenotype that is most looked for and probably could be summarized as the individual you are least likely to want to bring home to meet your parents because they're going to be horrified. And then during the luteal phase, as estrogen is going down, progesterone is coming up, you suddenly have women having a preference for rounder male faces and male faces that they judge as looking competent and trustworthy and kind instead of hot as hell. Yes, markers of fertility, markers of, are you going to be getting, good genes out of this individual? Or are you going to be getting good, reciprocal altruism out there? In some ways, the follicular stage in human female facial preference shows our remnants of being a tournament species. And in some way, female facial preferences during the luteal phase shows the remnants of us as being a classic pair bonding species. And right in between the two, and telling you something about who counts as appealing, who counts as hot. Meanwhile, over at the male end of things, yeah, their male interest and markers of female fertility, and one of the most reliable ones famed and sort of anthropology type people who think about these things is the waist hip ratio. A small waist hip ratio in women usually translates out into wide hips, and to get the old phrase or whatever, childbearing hips, waist hip ratios is a marker of fertility in women, is a marker of estrogen levels, that sort of thing. It's a marker of healthy prenatal life so that you developed large enough of a pelvic arch that you are not likely to hemorrhage to death when you try to give birth because it's too narrow for your kid's head to get through. And as shown, culture after culture all over this planet, you show men outlines of women, and you ask, these are like booty hunter-gatherers in the eastern Congo and people at Palo Alto High School and everything in between. And guys has the same preferences culture after culture, which is to have looking for women with wide hips, a fertility marker, and small waists. And that is independent of the overall body size that people find to be attractive, whether endomorphic or mesomorphic or ectomorphic or whatever it is in your culture. Superimposed on that is a male preference for particular waist hip ratios signaling fertility. Then of course, there is the eternal puzzle of male human attraction to breasts, which is like nobody thinks about that if you're a baboon or a male blue whale or something like that. And this is a puzzle because traditionally, as in for the last 100 million years of male in evolution, breasts were about child rearing, breasts were about milk production, selection for milk production, and ability to maintain that during periods of starvation, things of that sort. And now we have fetishized male obsessions with breast size, which turn out to have absolutely nothing to do with maternal nursing potential. There's no correlation whatsoever within or between cultures between breast size and capacity for milk production or maintaining production, even if you're starving. There's no correlation at all. It's completely unrelated. What do we have here? We have a dissociation between breasts as undergoing natural selection for milk production and breasts in many, but not all human cultures, undergoing sexual selection for size. So that getting into it. We also know that males find more attractive markers of ovulation in females when faces get rounder and voices get higher and pheromonal stuff probably changes. So we see this whole realm of, sure, you want to find someone who is healthy. What you really want to find are markers of reproductive health, fertility. Next, what do individuals look for in a mate? If you're a monogamous pair bonding species and you are looking for a mate, who do you have the most interest in? Someone who's going to be a competent parent. And you're going to be sharing this. Our whole world of you're a pair bonding bird, you're a pair bonding New World monkey like a tamarin or a marmoset, and there's all sorts of ritual stuff of male birds bringing worms ritualistically as a fixed action pattern to a female they're courting. Look at me, I know how to bring the worms home at the end of the day. What a great father I'm going to be. And you look for things like maternal competence. If you are a male pair bonding primate, you want to see evidence that, like the female's prior kids, have survived. What you see in pair bonding species is attraction is built around displays of competent parenting. Then you see this whole interesting world of bandwagon effects, having sort of two poles. The first one is everybody is suddenly interested in some sort of physical trait in the opposite sex. You're not interested in the slightest, but nonetheless, there's a certain logic to it that even though You don't find the individual attractive. If for all of time everybody else has, it means that they will continue to find a trait like that to be attractive in hopefully your male offspring. So even though you're not attracted to this guy, it is to your benefit to want to mate with him if that will increase the likelihood of passing on this popular trait. And this was shown in this spectacularly ironic or something study by this guy, Lee Dugatkin, where he took, I don't know, some sort of birds, grouse or cranes or something or other, and he put this pair out there, and the male was courting the female, and there was no magic in the air that day. The female was not interested in the male, completely disinterested. And then what was done was to show that there is a bandwagon effect possible. The next day, that same male is out there and strutting around and trying to attract this completely disinterested female, except those wildly manipulative ethology-minded researchers have made it look like this is the hottest guy on the prairie. What they did was take a whole bunch of stuffed female birds or whatever, and line them up around him like a rapt group of groupies. And what does the actual live female bird do looking at that saying, oh my God, he is still as much of a geek as he was yet. I don't get it. I don't get it why there's like a dozen females standing around him frozen with rapt excitement at his every sort of rippling muscle and all that. But you know what? I might as well mate with the guy. A bandwagon effect. I don't know why everyone finds it to be attractive, but if they do, that's probably a trait I want to have in my sons, and thus this guy becomes more attractive. Now, built into that, you see this fascinating sort of confound that comes in of this self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, so you get a female bird, for example, and there is some male trait that is suddenly popular, and she decides to go mate with a guy, or she mates with a guy based on any indices that he has good genes. So you mate with someone who has good genes or has a trait that is very popular by sexual selection, and this is going to be a great kid that you've gotten with these great genes and all of that. So what do? You invest more in them. A remarkable phenomenon. Female birds can control the amount of hormones of different types, the amount of nutrients they put into eggs before they lay them. Yes, they lay eggs. Before that, they can choose in egg production how much investment to put in this potential offspring. And what you see is when a female has mated with what would count as a more attractive male by bird standards, she puts more nutrients into the egg, and thus they're more likely to survive. Hmm. So, are they more likely to survive because this guy actually had good genes, or like totally unrelated to that, the female fell for it and decided that because this kid was going to be attractive, you want him to survive, so I'm going to put more effort into it. It is very hard to pull these things apart. So, bandwagon effects, self-fulfilling prophecies that make it very hard at times to tell whether individuals of these various species are making rational decisions or not as to who they're finding attractive. Now, the final domain of what people find to be attractive is really interesting. And the term for it is homogamy, being attracted to someone who shares a lot of traits with you. Whoa, ding, 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 ding. This should be sounding like elements of kin selection. Like you want to reproduce with individuals who are close kin because you've got, you know, kin selection and inclusive fitness and all of that adding up, and there's so much more advantageous. What about the dangers in inbreeding from too close relatives? We already saw this issue so many classes ago, where what you get is a balancing between the advantages of mating with a close relative and the inbreeding disadvantages, and in lots of species, seemingly including in us, that balance evening out somewhere around third cousin matings. Now, generalized more broadly, what homogamy is about is we are more attracted, on the average, to individuals who share traits in common with us. This is a remarkably strong phenomenon in some domains. Okay, shown here, we have different degrees of homogamy. You take someone and you look at who they are spending their life with and all of that, and there's more than a 90% chance that they will have been raised with the same religion, that they will be within a certain window, the same age, the same race, will have similar politics, will have similar socioeconomic status of their childhoods. Did they grow up rich, poor, middle class, in between? More than 90% chance of shared ethnicity. This is high degrees of homogamy. So that then you see those traits that are a little bit less homogeneous, but nonetheless are whoppingly consistent and statistically assertable, where you take somebody and there's somewhere between a 40 and 89% chance that they and their partner will have an IQ within the same similar range, that they will have similar educational backgrounds, that they will come out on roughly the same way on introversion, extroversion scales. In other words, what we're seeing is opposites attract is mostly a myth. Similars attract in all sorts of versions of compatibility. Then, while lesser effects, but still statistically significant, take somebody and anywhere from a 20 to a 39% chance that they and their partner will be in the same percentile weight range. Obviously not the same weight, but in the top 10% or the bottom or whatever. Height, weight, hair color, eye color, nose width, earlobe length, how close the eyes are to each other, lung capacity. You know how you're out on a date and there's like some really hot person and they turn out, oh no, they don't have the right lung capacity. So you swipe left. You swipe out. I don't know. My kids will be embarrassed with me. I can't remember if you swipe left or swipe right or whether people actually do that anymore. All bizarre stuff. You're more likely than chance to wind up settling down for life with someone with a similar lung capacity to you. What is this? This is a surrogate measure for things like similar ethnicity, similar race, some body things that go along with that, not as high predictability. You are far more likely to get involved with somebody of the same ethnicity as you than somebody who has a lung capacity that is statistically typical of your ethnicity. Much weaker marker, but these are all surrogate measures for some of these really powerful ones. Then we get one more interesting thing here. Looking at the age distribution of young, old, okay, let's say 20s here and 50s there. And what is the time of life where people are most likely to form stable, significant relationships with someone who is not homogamous, someone who has all sorts of differences, like on the chart I just erased without thinking, or all sorts of non-homogamous traits. When is it most likely? Yeah, totally predictable. It is late adolescence, early adulthood, where you have the highest rates of non-homogamous, stable relationships, non-homogamous marriages, all of that. What is it? Your age group openness to novelty is one of the most driving forces you got there. And all sorts of interesting studies have been done on at what age do you start showing less interest in novelty for its own sake in all sorts of cultural domains. Adolescence, early 20s is when people are most likely to be having a stable, serious relationship with someone who is not particularly homogamous with that. So that makes perfect sense. That's wonderful. That's terrific. But then you see an interesting thing in some of these studies, and I find this so charming, which is there's a little bit of a rise then in people roughly in their 50s or so when marrying for the first time, remarrying, divorce, or whatever, where there's a little bump around here in the likelihood of marrying someone from a different race, different ethnicity, different SCS background, different politics, all of that. What is this about? Are we looking at biology here? No, not in the slightest. Here's what I'm sure is going on, which is sitting there. What is this rise about? This is someone you've been in a relationship for years and years, yet you haven't gotten married. Why not? Why do you wait until around that? You're waiting until your parents die so you don't kill them with the shock of doing this. There appears to be some cultural factors coming into this. Okay, so amid all of that, this attraction stuff, what we're seeing is, some mixed strategies, the same regardless of your sex, some dramatically different ones is what you're looking for. And this seemingly came through in this landmark study by this guy, David Buss at UT Austin, zoologist, biological anthropologist, whatever, who famously did this massive study asking gazillions of people from all sorts of cultures from all over the planet, asking them, like, so here's a list of traits, here's a list of 10 traits, rank order which is most important to you in terms of what you look for in a mate, and the whole array there, and thousands of people, and again in the Eastern Congo or in the freshman psychology class and everything in between, and back came some very strikingly consistent findings that seem to feed into everything we've been hearing about here, which is virtually in every single culture, on the average, men ranked a mate being younger than them as more desirable than did women. In virtually every culture, men ranked the importance of physical markers of fertility as important to them more so than women. Guys high up on their lists. In contrast, among women, culture after culture, they consistently were more likely than men to want a partner who was somewhat older than them, and consistently looking for markers of economic prowess. Oh my God, this is so discouraging. This is so stereotyped. We've got like every cliche coming true of what humans are attracted to. So, on first pass, that seems like a totally depressing finding. But then lurking in there was in some ways the most important finding of all, which is regardless of sex and regardless of culture, way high up on the list of what people valued was finding a mate who was kind and nice and all of that. So like the size of your bank account or your secondary sexual characteristics or whatever aside, at the end of the day, that is a commonality between the sexes. Phew, okay, so we finished with a little bit of good news here, a little bit of relief, and allowing us to bid farewell to sex forever after. And we now start our next topic. Our next topic, aggression.